Hello, everyone. Welcome to our, sorry, I have my notes. Welcome, everyone, to our first positive death program. I'm here with Laetitia Barbier to talk about the symbolism, iconography, and storytelling power of the tarot cards. Laetitia is a art historian as well as a cartomancy enthusiast. Laetitia, I'll turn it over to you.
Well, thank you so much, Jade, and thank you for everyone joining us today. Thank you for this wonderful opportunity to talk about one of my maybe my favorite topic, tarot. Can you put my slides on? Oh, perfect. Awesome. So today we're going to talk about tarot's forgotten iconography, symbolism, and storytelling power. Um, whoop, give me just 1 second. Here we go. So my name is Laetitia Barbier, and I'm very excited to be with you today and talk about tarot. A little more about me. I'm French, as you can hear. I have a strong accent. I'm a professional tarot reader, as Jade said, and I'm also a tarot teacher. But today I'm not going to really talk about tarot in my capacity of tarot reader, which is a peculiar career choice, and I'll be happy to discuss that later in the Q&A. Today, I'm going to wear my hat of tarot scholar, although I don't really see myself as a tarot historian, and it's very sweet of you to say I'm an art historian. But my background is actually in art history, and I have a bachelor degree from the Sorbonne University, and I do a lot of research on tarot, its history, iconography, and practice. And I'm particularly fascinated about tarot as a cultural object. What I'm interested in is to understand the cultural history around those cards, the historical context in which these images were created, what they meant at the moment of their creation, what they meant to us today, and also what they say about us as a culture. So when people ask me, when people talk to me about tarot, they usually think about tarot as a fortune telling tool. But what we'll see together today is that because of its long and complex history, tarot is much more than a fairground trick unveiling one's fate. It's a global culture, a culture of images and stories, always in motion, reinventing itself from one century to the other. And this culture is tied together partly by the visual heritage of the Western world. And it was also born out of two very human impulses, I should say, or drive to play games and or need to create meaning out of story. Or need to create meaning and stories out of the chaos of life. So, being a French girl living in the US, I live in Brooklyn, by the way. I'm between two of the most prominent tarot traditions in the Anglo-Saxon world. If we think about tarot, we usually think about the Rider-Waite-Smith deck, which you can see some images, some cards from here. It was conceptualized by Arthur Edward Waite and also designed by genius artist Pamela Coleman Smith in 1909. But if you were French like me, there is a great chance that if you were looking for a tarot deck in a store, you'd probably find one like this, like a Marseille, or in that case, a Dodal tarot. It's because, different countries have different tarot tradition. And if you go to Mexico or Morocco, if you go to Russia, you'll see people read different type of cards. And cartomancy, the art of reading cards, is incredibly wide and incredibly rich, and also rather old in its tradition. So I think I made it my mission to show how interesting and complex these traditions are. So we can kind of go beyond the Rider-Waite centric tradition and see, like other ways that are sometimes overlooked and or forgotten completely in the Anglo-Saxon world. So the first example, I'm going to give you a kind of a crash course on tarot on tarot card history. This is nothing fulfilling, but it's going to give you some basis. Playing cards have a very old history. There is a lot of it's a complicated field. Academically, it's hard to know exactly where they came from and have like a fact base history of them, because cards themselves are so fragile, and they are like very very little examples managed to cross or eras. But usually it's mostly agreed upon that the idea of playing with pieces of printed paper was invented by the Chinese, and through commerce, through China, Persia, India, and areas of Africa, those games of printed with printed paper kind of transformed and circulated to land in Egypt, to land in the Mamluk Empire, which used to play a card game that is very often believed to be the ancestor of our own playing cards. That game is usually referred to as the Mamluk deck, the Mamluk playing cards. And here we have 4 examples. Why is it an ancient ancestor of our playing cards? It's because the structure of card games that we know, a certain numbers of cards divided in 4 categories. In the context of the tarot, we have wands, swords, coins, and cups. Well, those suits, those 4 categories were actually invented in the through the Mamluk games, which probably existed at least starting the 13th century. The 4 suit they had were polistic, that you can see here. Polistic. I think this is a sword. This is a scimitar. The sword were curved. Then you have, I think, I can't remember which one are those. I think those are old scimitars after that. But anyway, so because they around the 13th century, those cards were played, and because of commerce with Mediterranean Europe, mostly like Spain, Italy, those games kind of crossed the pond and became popular in Europe through the south, basically. Starting the 14th century, in Spain, Italy, and Southern Europe in general, you start to see appearing card games that have the same suit system. And then it spreads all around Europe to become the card craze we know. Here is an example that you can see. This is a Spanish game. Well, of course, it's not from the 14th century. It's from the 16th century. But you can see a little bit how those game looks like. You can see the wands here. Whoops, sorry. You can see the wands here. Here you have a king of wands, the coin suit. I think those are still wands, but you have... I can't move my arrow so much. You can see some swords as well, and cups at the top as well. And so the Italian, so those cards became really popular, and the Italians are the one that are usually credited to invent that 5th suit, which is going to later become the major arcana. They invented that fifth suit to complexify the game. And that's a very important idea here. We're not talking about divination cards. We're not talking about fortune-telling cards. We're talking about games. We're talking about entertainment. And the Italian, to complexify this game of trick-taking that they invented in a fifth suit called the Triumphi suit. A set of cards that are heavily illustrated and with allegorical images, and that are gonna like become later the jewel of the tarot. Again, those cards are not used for divination; they're used for play, and the use we have for them, for divination, for fortune telling, for magic, for self-exploration, is actually a bastardization of those that use. It's like using camera, photographic camera to chase ghosts. Like it's a hijack, basically, of the cards. And so, what are those images really about? Um, Although in the 15th and 16th century, well, those images really varied in order and in iconography. Like the games were not really solidified. So, in different areas of Italy, in France as well, you would have somehow similar images or surrounding similar topics, but with different iconography, different iconographical vein, and but that I want to say visual body really crystallized around the 17th and 18th century with the kind of solidification of the occult tarot. Like one day, and I'll talk about that in a moment. But at some point, the kind of the Marseille example, or at least in France, the Marseille example is going to solidify the order of the card and also their iconography. But what we really have to look at here is that those images, although they're all different, they really speaks about something specific. In the 15th and 16th century, they almost speak about a sort of metrics of the known world, a catalog of images and ideas that are actually very sophisticated, and they're talking about the way we live and what we experience, from the most profane level to the most sacred. So I'm going to show you a couple of things, but before that, I also wanted to talk about the fact that since it's a class, it's a lecture on storytelling. Like there is a lot of bridges to be made between tarot, its iconography, and also literature. One of them being that we don't really know where those images come from. For in the 18th century, occultists, until very recently, until the 20th century, occultists believed those images came from ancient Egypt. They were a sacred book of Egyptian hermeticism. But it's actually historically true, and that was revealed. Although it's again very strong. How can I say that? Very strong. There is very strong chances that it's true. It was revealed by a woman who, in the 50s, her name was Gertrude Markley. She was a librarian in the New York Public Library, and in the 50s, she wrote this article, which is very important, and it's going to really become a milestone in tarot scholarship. Basically wondering where those images come from. If they really come from Egypt, that's really bizarre, because those first example we have, they date from Italy, from the 15th century. And the Italian, were not really obsessed. They were really obsessive about lots of things, but they were not obsessive about Egypt at all. And so what she says is like one of the things that really became a big sensation in Italy in the 15th century, at the moment where those first major arcana appears, is a poem by Petrarch, and that poem is called Petrarch's Triumph. You can see a spread of images here. Petrarch's Triumph is it's a very important poem, which might be kind of the Carta Magna of the tarot. One of the things that if you want to know what the poem is about, it's a metaphorical poem in which Petrarch, who's in love with a woman, is going to describe the sublimation of his feelings from the most carnal aspects of them, his feelings of love, like the eros, to the most divine aspect of his love, something that transcends carnal desires to become closer to God. And he's going to choose a metaphor to talk about that in his poem. That metaphor is the one of the Roman triumph. It's a parade, a procession that Romans used to do in the antique world for real, to celebrate their victory during the battle, after the battle. And what they used to do is parade around in a procession in those carts, and then receive the laurels of victory. And so Petrarch is going to take that metaphor, and he's going to use allegorical ideas. In this order, it's going to talk about love, and then chastity, and then death, and then fame, and then I think eternity. No, which one is it? Like fame, time, and eternity. And all, like here you can see chastity right there, that white character being on her cart. And then chastity is going to be vanquished, literally, by by death. You can see here. And you can see that character, that white, that lady in white clothes, being literally trampled by death. And so one of the things that Geoffrey Markley says is that, that poem was very popular. It was very heavily illustrated. And one of the things that apparently got very popular in northern Italy at the time was to reenact those allegorical procession by doing floats of, allegorical ideas. And so she quote that as being, like, oh, chastity, maybe it could be, like a version of the papes, for example, or death is namely in the tarot. Time could be maybe related to those very early cards in the tarot that speaks about time that later becomes a hermit, etc., etc. So she believes that the tarot and its iconography might be actually sourced in a literary, work of art. Is she right? Well, her work has been critiqued, but like people still work around those ideas, and I found that very interesting for what we have to look at today. So when I talked about that metrics of the known world, what did I really meant? Well, the cards themselves really speaks about different layers of existence, different layers of the known world. For example, if we look at those cards, and I put those elements here, those little cards from the Rider-Waite-Smith, so you can get a visual echo of what you know from the contemporary tarot. But those are mostly 15th century cards. So here we have the Fool and the Magician, and those two cards really show us that tarot shows a bunch of stock characters, people like us. Some of them are modest, or they have their own skill sets. They're earthly being. They're like people from all walks of life. The Fool, for example, is an outcast. He's a destitute. He's a madman. But there is something holy about him, almost like a pilgrim, someone who's a renegade, a spiritual renegade. The Magician, which is right here, very also called a juggler, is very often seen as a kind of a charismatic showman, both a romantic thief and a street smart character. We also, in the tarot, we also see another different layer of that. We see people of power, people who have authority upon us. Here we see the Empress. She's a diplomat and a protector of peace. She's bearing, as you can see here, a shield showing the Holy Roman Empire's Black Eagle. So she's a politician. She's a political figure. She's a woman. She's a woman of power. And of course, we have the Pope. The Pope was seen here as God's representative. Of course, we're in 15th century Italy, so it's a Christian country, and church has a huge political power. And the Pope is a very important political figure in the Italian Renaissance. And so what's interesting here is that we see power divided in two, the secular power, an emperor, an empress, and then the spiritual power, the Pope. In the tarot, we also meet more abstract ideas. When I see that matrix of knowledge, it's not about people, it's also about concept, philosophical concept that are linked to moral philosophy. In the case of those two cards, justice and temperance, those two cards are two concepts that are linked to the iconography of the cardinal virtues. Cardinal virtues being those four pillars that come from the antique world: justice, temperance, prudence, and fortitude. And so those ideas are, some of them are namely in the tarot, as we're going to see. Of course, justice and temperance are. Those were kind of moral axes in which people used to abide from. And so they are equally represented in the tarot. And of course, in the tarot, we meet very evocative cards. Card that speaks about suffering, the suffering from the body, the hangman, transcending the suffering of the body. And of course, death. Ultimately, after that suffering, we die. But what's interesting, of course, for us is that as we look at this image, which is, all the major arcana from the tarot divided in three groups, we see that death, which is right here, is almost kind of in the middle of the narrative section, the narrative series of the major arcana. So technically, this is not the end of our journey. This is not the end of our journey. There is so many more cards after that. We are in the middle of our adventure here. Somehow, according to the tarot, we're supposed to have many more stories after we pass the threshold of our own demise. And those stories are somehow not, some of them are not fun. Some of them are pretty dark. According to the metaphorical stories of the major arcana, after being welcomed by the angel of temperance, which is right here, um, well, we meet the devil. We descend to the underworld in the Chthonian realm, as like Dante in Dante's Inferno. We visit the underworld. We are digested literally by the devil. There is this idea of counter initiation in that card. And then with the tower, which is kind of the destructive power of the tarot, we get shredded. we get to shed our old skin. All the things that we were before in our earthly light just get completely destroyed. And as we travel in the later in that narrative section, well, we travel in celestial sphere, like suddenly we don't have bodies anymore. In the story that the tarot tells, we hop between lunar and solar orbs. We're gracefully floating in the infinite, and then at the end of our journey, we fuse fully with the cosmos, in that enigmatic, pretty climactic epilogue that the world card is. It's the last card of the tarot. And so this is very interesting for us. Like we have like a vision of the overarching vision of the tarot is something that tells us that death is not the end. Death is just like how do you call that? Is that a conundrum? A Rubicon, sorry. A Rubicon. Death is a Rubicon in our story. It's just a rite of passage. And then something else happened and life goes on and we get transformed. Like in the Lavoisier, I don't know if you're aware of that French Revolution chemist. Lavoisier is often quoted to have said that wonderful quote that I think really applies to the tarot. Nothing dies, nothing is created. Everything transforms, and tarot seems to have a narrative that speaks about that very directly. And so some of those cards are stories, and they are depicted as stories. If we take the example of the strength card, for example, the iconography that it comes to show is like a story that we know. In that case, it's the story of Samson. Samson, the biblical hero from the Old Testament, which is seen. Yeah, I don't know if you know the story of Samson. It's pretty amazing and bizarre. He's like a proto Superman, in my opinion. Is how can I say that? His faith is sublimated by God into physical strengths, and so like he's got many adventures in which he literally just break things and destroy things, and like to protect himself. And it's really incredible. And so there is this very famous episode in his early in his story in which he goes around and meet the lion of Timnah. I think it's called the Lion of Timnah. And the it's like a very complicated story. Like he like goes into see the lion, and then like God grants him the superpower, and he tears a lion apart with his bare hand, which is what we see here. This is, by the way, a beautiful rendition of that by Lucas Cranach, the elder. Really wonderful and powerful image too. Like very strange. Another great image of the I'll say feature. One of the great feature of the tarot is, for example, this card, the Wheel of Fortune. The Wheel of Fortune is a concept that comes from the antique world. It comes from the goddess Fortuna. Fortuna, the goddess that commands fate. And Fortuna has two attributes. She has the cornucopia, the horn of plenty, and she also has the Rota Fortunae, the Wheel of Fortune, a wheel in which she kind of like choose randomly who's gonna get her bounties, literally, or abundance gifts. And so that motif is going to travel from the antique world to the medieval world and kind of be reinitiated there as a symbol of fate, the inexorable like turning of fate, like we see here, which I found, like, I really love that image, which is from Albrecht Dürer's The Sheep of Fool. And this is a wheel of fortune, and we can see gestures that are also kind of donkeys that are kind of trying to grab themselves onto that wheel, which turns very fast. And of course, they're trying to stay on top of the wheel because that's where their position of power is. But they always fall to their demise. And what we see on that image right here, which I found fabulous, it's like the wheel is activated by the hand of God Himself, like a kind of a Monty Python gigantic hand. He kind of like turn the wheel for himself. Um, and so what we see in that card and in some of those cards in general is that those images become important and symbolically charged conceptual motif, like abstractions that are designed that are instantly understandable by people at the time they were created as well. So here is why do I have this weird Lego little slide here? Well, to sum it up, like tarot cards and their evocative images weave universal story in a visual language that we can all understand. It can be understood by everyone. Like literally, like iconographic Lego bricks, they form normalized narrative units that are always interchangeable. When we read cards, the first thing we do is we shuffle them, and so by shuffling the cards, we shuffle their narrative potential. Like we just like we just change the order to create a different story. And the tarot, by essence, is like a book, but it's like an unbound book, a little bit like I remember when I was a kid, those books were very popular. It's like the books in which you're your own hero. Like you flip the page, and then you have like chances. Like if you want to go and open that door, go to page 20. If you want to close that door and go and follow your path next door, go to page 36. Tarot has the same mechanism. Once shuffled, it reveals a new story with different level of interpretation. As much as we can use tarot decks to dissect our own narrative, or to give validity to our own story, we can also create new ones, and we can invent different pathways of understanding for our own life. So tarot served very often as an allegorical toolbox, inspiring writers and artists to create stories of their own. And so we're going to look that before we're going to look at that, I'm going to quote that thing because I really love that. Sorry, it's a little silly, but when you're a tarot reader, you function a lot of with metaphors and images, and I love that idea of Lego bricks. One tarot teacher that I really appreciate is Alexander Jodorowsky. He's also a famous cult filmmaker. If you've never seen his film, The Holy Mountain, is very heavily tarot related. He also did Santa Sangre, which is one of my favorite films. Well, he's also wrote prominently about tarot. He's a very interesting scholar. And so he used that word to qualify tarot, which used tarot is a nomadic cathedral. And I really love that. I love the idea of the nomadic cathedral. When we speak about cathedral, we also speak about cathedral being alchemical books in stone. I don't know if this is very much your interest, but if you ever live in Paris, for example, and you're interested in hermetic topics, you'll understand that for example, for the alchemical process, a lot of the things that people study and that knowledge is kept is by in stained glasses or sculptures that are adorning cathedral. And so cathedrals are very much living books of hermetic sciences. And this idea of that the tarot is one of them, but it's one we can carry around. I found that very beautiful and very strong. So just right a second ago, I said that tarot served as an allegorical toolbox, inspiring writers and artists to create their own story. And I'm going to give you a couple of examples that I really love that, like some people are might be oh, tarot, that's going to be woo-woo, that's perfect for Halloween. But in the history of literature, people have actually worked on the topic of tarot, and one of the most important, most beautiful example of that, how tarot cards inspired authors, is to be found in The Wasteland, T.S. Eliot's incredible poem from 1922, which as completely redefined modern poetry. And if you ever, and I really engage you to read The Wasteland, but there is a passage in one of the very early chapter in which he discussed an actual tarot reading given by a woman called Madame Sosatris, which is inspired by the Rider-Waite Smith's deck. And it's very I'm going to read you that little extract that I have here because I really love it. Madame Sosatris, famous clairvoyante, had a bad cold. Nevertheless, is known to be the wisest woman in Europe, with a wicked pack of cards. Here, said she, is your card, the drowned Phoenician sailor. Those are pearls that were his eyes. Look, here is Belladonna, the lady of the rocks, the lady of situations. When we talk about the drowned Phoenician sailor, it sounds like a very hard detail to look at, but we are actually talking about a very small depiction that is right here in that tarot card, which shows a Phoenician boat and the idea that the Phoenician sailor meet his death as he ride the boat. Of course, it doesn't talk about the tarot card, the death card, but he uses his word to create that story. One detail of that card is going to allow him to find a beautiful, bizarre story with the Phoenician sailor and those pearls that were in his eyes. And of course, Belladonna, the lady of the rocks, is the Queen of Cups. Like she is on like sitting on pebbles on the rocks, and then she's the ladies of situation. So like this is a great example in which basically an artist used the tarot as like a starting point to weave more images than the cards actually mean. And I found that which I just found that very exciting and beautiful. Another very famous example, which again, I'm sorry, I'm just literally talking about my favorite stuff. So I hope you'll bear with me. If you've not read it, The Castle of Cross Destinies by Italo Calvino. What a wonderful example. It's a haunting novel. I really found that novel haunting. And so if you've never read it, it tells that story of travelers who kind of somehow meet in that castle, and they are unable to speak. And so they recount their tale, their story, their life story, by basically putting tarot cards on a table. And the book is very interesting because if you read it, you will read the story, and then you will have the tarot card. You will have the tarot card right there on the page to help you understand where Italo Calvino kind of like brought in those meanings. And so again, it's an amazing read. And that's for me, it's a really demystifying one for sure, because it shows that tarot, it celebrates tarot as a really unique storytelling tool, and a storytelling tool that has inherently a multi-layered capacity to tell a story. Like cards don't have a unilateral way to see things. They are tunnels. They are tunnels in which we can find so much meaning. And I found those attempts like really, really beautiful. There is plenty of others. One of them, this is a little more pop culture, and I hope that that you'll enjoy that. One of my favorite things, I read that this summer, so it was my summer treat, and I'm just completely obsessed by it. So I want to say I'm not a versed person in comic books, but I really enjoyed that. Promethea by Alan Moore, of course, famous like comic book writer who wrote Watchmen and many other great work, V for Vendetta, etc., etc. Was also, of course, Alan Moore is famous for being a practicing ceremonial magician, so he knows about tarot, about ceremonial magic, kind of more the British traditions of it. And so Promethea is a great comic books because it really weave some of the Golden Dawn theory of magic and tarot in its tale, and also, of course, it talks about Promethea, which is this kick-ass superhero who's like a mystical being. I really found that like one of the most beautiful way. If you're not into tarot as a divination tool and you just want to kind of get wrapped into tarot as like a philosophical metaphor, like you might want to get into that because it's really fun. So do we have anybody here? I'd love to, if you're in the comment, if you're watching this, I would love for you to just say hi, and then say something just to see if I have people here. Otherwise, if we can play game, or otherwise, I'll just go through that myself. Anybody here? Can you hear me? Is that like a seance? Nobody's there. Okay, no problem.
Well,
Um,
I'm here, so
oh, okay. Okay,
anyone else?
no, anyone else? There's like it's always like those like visual things. They're always like seances. Like, if you're here, knocked 3 times. Totally fine. So here's a game. Here's a couple of game I do with my students, and like if you watch the video later, you can still try to do them. It's fun, like tarot can be used as a free association game, and that's the way I read it, which is an I will say I usually call what I do poetic and intuitive counseling. I use a lot of storytelling in my work, and I see my work as a poetic work, as an art. For me, tarot is very much like a poetic performance, that performance that can heal parts of the soul. It might be a little stretch in the woo, but hey, why not? So one of the things that I like to do with my students is try to take some tarot cards and then see how they can relate to people we know, celebrities, fiction character, people in your family, etc., etc. And so today we're going to do that game with the King of Pentacle. The King of Pentacle is not a major arcana; it's minor arcana. The minor arcana have 4 court cards: Page, Knight, Queen, and King. So this is the top one. This is the King, and traditionally is linked to those keywords which I found on BD Tarot to just kind of. And I also added some of my own personal. So when the card is upright, the King of Pentacle is usually synonymous of wealth, business, leadership, security, discipline, abundance, but also someone bigger than life, someone who needs a lot of space. In its reverse capacity, which the reverse technique is something I will discuss actually next in a couple on next Sunday. I'm doing a special class about this. The the reverse aspect is sometimes like linked to the shadow aspect of the card, but sometimes linked to like an inverted reality, not always just the bad stuff. But here we have a couple of examples that are not limited to that, but somehow iconic. Financially inept, obsessed with wealth and status, stubborn, someone who likes to overindulge, and a glutton. So if you had, I can ask you, Jade, you have, and if you don't have an answer, don't worry. If you were to, maybe just like, if I talk about the King of Pentacles, do you know a person, like maybe a celebrity or someone or around, like that could be a good fit to define, for example, the King of Pentacle? Do you have an idea? Is there someone that comes to mind?
Ooh.
You can say no. Don't worry if you don't have an
I
answer.
will say no.
No worries. No worries. Well, it's okay because I have an answer for this. Ooh, where am I? I have an answer for this. And I'm sorry for the terrible image, but when I think about the King of Pentacles, sometimes I think about Orson Welles, the film director who created Citizen Kane, who toward the end of his life was kind of like, it became this gigantic overeating, like like swallowing everything human being. And one of the things that is nefarious for is this like terrible advertisement for he did for some kind of cognac. And I really think about, when I think about the King of Pentacle, I really think about him. not just because he loved eating and he became just like this kind of glutton master, but also because he was bigger than life, because he created Citizen Kane at 23 or something. There was something about the fact that he had such a vision, that he just became like this, like incredible cinematographer that reinvented the codes of cinema. And so when I think about leadership, discipline, I think about him. Bigger than life, I think about him. But also when I think about stubborn, maybe obsessed by wealth, maybe, and also overindulging and glutton, I think about him too. So for me, it's kind of a perfect um, like King of Pentacle. So that's a good way to learn the cards. It's something that most tarot teacher do as an exercise. Just like try to understand the character of the cards that are linked to the tradition, and then see if you can find echoes in things that and tell that story for yourself. Um, Jade, if you want to answer this one too, like if you have if this card was a verb, what kind of verb would it be? Do you have any idea?
I
If,
don't have a verb, but when I first saw it, I thought of sisters.
sisters, yeah, that's okay. That's actually a beautiful image, a beautiful way to qualify this. Yeah, sisters, celebration, family reunion. There is something feminine and celebratory about that card. Like a union, the coven. Those things where like women gather to partake in a secret celebration. And so there is something like definitely there is a sorority aspect in that card, and a festive one as well. So one of the way we can understand the cards, like I like to imagine them. I'm French, so like in France, the language is very grammar heavy, and there is always a lot of exceptions. And I used to do, I did humanities in high school and later on in university. And I remember I had great pleasure doing text analysis. Just like kind of like dissecting texts and then seeing, like how what the writer wanted to say by using a certain adjective or using a certain style figure. Like so there is so much you can find in the text by just kind of like dissecting it. And the tarot is the same. Tarot functions like a sentence. Like a card is going to be the subject, a card is going to be the verb, a card is going to be maybe a mood or a color that is going to just give a compliment of that story. And so it's interesting to see the card this way as well, like a sentence in which you have to decipher what commands what, like who's the subject who commands that verb, like who's the subject that commands the action. And so if we were to do, for example, a quick little reading, um, doing this, like something I will do with my students is I will say, we'll put a slide like this and just like, okay, let's do a reading. Let's say like I'm coming to you with a question, and my question is, how should I prepare for my exam next week? So kind of a student anxiety coming back this week for some reason. And so I will come to my students, oh, like I need a tarot reading. How can I prepare for my exam next week? And so like let's say my student will say, okay, let's do a two card reading. One card is going to indicate the things you should do, and the one card is going to indicate the thing you should not do and don't. So that's why I put that on the slide. And so let's imagine that we have those two cards that we saw earlier, that we kind of like try to associate with things. The first card, Jade, you said sisters, sororities, something about like being together with women. Maybe one thing I could do to prepare my exam might be, well, maybe I should study with my lady friends. Maybe I should try to make it more of a social gathering, instead of like something where I basically um, starve myself in my bedroom on my desk, like drinking too much coffee. And then making my eyes, like using my eyes on the computer screen. Maybe I should make it as a social event, a sorority event, something that is, a way to gather, and a way to celebrate the fact that, like we are in this together. That might be a good way to read that card and answer that question. And in the don'ts, um, we have the King of Pentacles. So what does it mean? We saw that, like kind of Orson Welles thing. So maybe I should not feel too confident. Maybe I should not, like try to buy. It's very interesting. Try to buy too many books, and I should actually like maybe buy two books and read them thoroughly instead of like trying to accumulate knowledge that might not serve me. Maybe I should, instead of being into the too muchness, I should try to be in the synthesis and then make index cards with all these things so I can have all the indication as under the form of keywords in some kind of minimalism. So that's one way we can read cards. um, you know Many ways. And so I'm gonna leave you today with this very beautiful painting, which I love. Which I love. One day I will have time to do a whole maybe one day I will have time to do a whole book on this. It's one of my favorite topic: surrealism and tarot. Another artistic literary movement very much inspired by the occult, but also specifically by tarot and the evocative power of the major arcana. This is at a painting which is in the Guggenheim in New York. It's called The Surrealist. It was made by Victor Brauner in 1947, and it shows him as the magician card, having the tool of transformation around him. In instead of this table, there is this rather enigmatic insect kind of pumping what's the name of it, elixir out of this flowery fire. It's pretty amazing painting. And so what is tarot exactly? Like tarot is a device. It's an instrument. It's not a church. It's not a dogma. It's not something satanic. It's like a guitar. Like the way I like to see it's like a guitar or a piano. It's an instrument. It's a device. Everyone can pick it up and create a melody, the melody they want. Some people might be more into jazz. Some people might be more into classical. Some people might be more into improvisation. Everybody should feel free to take that tool and use it the way they want, with their own sensibility, their own cultural background, their own social history. And like every creative tool, tarot is activated by your imagination. And so, and some people are more gifted than others, but or some people are more drawn to it for some reason. But at the end, we all have this capacity of imagination. We all have this capacity to create. So it is, if you want to be more, if you're interested in developing your imagination or your storytelling practice, you might be interested in using the tarot for that. Actually, there is, I didn't put them in the slideshow, but there is several books that are specifically catered for writers, tarot for writers, tarot for storytellers, in which you can, with exercises that are like incredibly interesting on how to build a character, how to build a character's arch by using tarot cards. A little bit like what Italo Calvino did, like you can just become your own Italo Calvino and create a story out of those tarot cards. And so some people are naturally drawn to it. Some people are naturally good at it. But at the end of the day, because of their visual language, they have it's like the cards have their own tempo, and we have to sync to it, like a song. We have to learn how to dance with it. It's very much like music. The way I see it is very much like music. And so the images on the major arcana bears a very they bear subliminally. Sorry about this. The major arcana, they bear images that subliminally convey that idea, which is important in the tarot. Some sort of alchemical transformation, some sort of life path in which death is just a milestone. And so it is a very interesting allegory of life and death. Like it is a very interesting allegory in which death is just a part of life. Like to conclude on that death positive aspect. Like maybe like if we were reminded, like in the tarot, if we were reminded that we are going to die, we might that the death card is part of the pack, that it is the only human experience that we all going to have to experience. It's the missing link between all of us. Well, we we should get a little more perspective on how we live our life. We should just go directly for the stuff that are meaningful to us. So universal and intangible, this idea from in the tarot can without words allow us to contemplate our own stories, which is important. Contemplating our own narrative. um, what is our story? Where are they going? Can we create new ones? And most importantly, tarot can help us find solace in the beauty of those stories that we create, and sometimes that can ease our soul. Like, there's so much to be said. Actually, not it's not part of my official conclusion, but I was I was reading an article the other day about that new branch, um, of scholarship that opened in Columbia University called narrative medicine. And I found that such a beautiful, like a beautiful idea. The idea that by telling our stories, by trying to talk about um, our ways, in our own ways, there is a way we can heal. There is a way we can talk about our uneasiness, and then both doctor and patient grow out of that. I found that, well, of course, I'm probably not knowing enough to be like giving a great explanation about this, but I found that very true. Like the tarot can help us articulate without words our own stories, and they are meaningful. The stories are meaningful to contemplate. And so thank you very much. Oh, I have a last slide. Sorry about this. Thank you very much for everything. Here's my website right here if you want to contact me and ask me a question. I also wanted to plug this. I'm publishing a book which is coming out in November, called Tarot and Divination Cards, Visual Archive. And it's coming out in all good bookstores through Abrams Books and Sereninos. And I am very excited to see that book out, and I would love for you to look at it if you have a chance. Thank you so much for everything, Jade.
Thank
Do you
you
have
for
any
being on.
questions? Do you have any
Um,
question or anything? I'm happy to, take
well,
some questions.
everyone, I put the link to Letty's website in the comments. And my comment, I guess, would be when you mentioned how authors were inspired by the tarot. I immediately thought of Chaucer and the Pilgrims, and I was kind of trying to make connections between them.
Mhm.
But it is, I guess, I feel like there's inspiration there because
Well,
yeah.
yeah, like, so I don't know. I'm not sure exactly what you're. I don't know that author, and I don't know the Pilgrim, but the Pilgrim is a tarot card in the tarot. The Hermit is a pilgrim. And so those ideas, they're very much, like, they are universal ideas. They are kind of little bricks, as I said, there are little bricks in which we can weave stories. And so you will find a lot of like transversality, crossovers between um, what the story we read, and then how we can articulate them with the tarot. That's a completely mundane and stupid things. But I'm rewatching, like a lot of people, because of, like, I'm rewatching The Sopranos, which is this very famous TV show from the late 90s, early 2000s. And I love I love it so much. And then they just made a new movie, which I saw last weekend. And it's interesting to see the Soprano cast of character through the spectrum of tarot cards, because, like, I surprised myself thinking, oh my god, like, this person is such an ace of wands, this person is like getting like such a like queen of sword reverse, like Carmilla, she's such a queen of sword, for example. Anyway, so there is, like, the moment, like, you have to imagine tarot as a lens of understanding of the world. It's not the only lens. There's so many other lenses we can use, but if you study stories, or if you want to write stories, or if you want to tell stories, it might be an interesting tool to look at, because it's very complete. It is very wholesome in a weird way.
Okay. Now, let me write down tarot and divination cards of visual archives.
Yeah.
We've got. All right. Thank you so much for joining us here in the virtual realm. And everyone, thank you for watching. Laetitia, thank you again.
Thank you so much, Jade. It was a great pleasure. Thank you again. And I'm very excited to look at the other programs you're putting. Have a great evening.
Thank you.
Bye
You
bye.
too.